What's up, guys? This is Holland with the Wolverine.com, and we're back with another Tuesday live show here exclusively on our YouTube channel. Make sure to like this video, subscribe to our YouTube channel for free, get notifications every time we drop new videos. And also, if you're not a subscriber to the Wolverine.com, now is a great time to do so. If you are a subscriber, Christmas is coming up, so you can obviously gift a subscription. We have a special promotion just for you guys here on YouTube. It's $1 for 2 months. Use that promo code UM1 over at thewolverine.com. A great time to subscribe, especially with the late period coming up in January. You have the transfer portal in full swing. Michigan's going bowling. Don't miss out on this special offer for the Wolverine.com. Use that promo code UM1. That's $1 for 2 months. All right, guys. So this is the Q&A show. I know we were hitting a little bit of a lull in recruiting until after, the transfer portal window closes and we head into the late period. But here to answer all of your questions, and just quick housekeeping note, the next couple of Tuesdays actually fall on holiday, so we probably won't have a show until we pick it back up for the late period. I think the first Tuesday that we'll be back is January 7th. So we'll take a couple of weeks off for New Year's Eve and Christmas Eve. But yeah, I just wanted to clear that up. So this will be the last show of the year. So make sure to get your questions in. If you want to skip the line, you can leave a super chat. That money goes directly to my travel budget so I can continue to see top Michigan commits and targets across the country. All right, let's get into the questions. And let's go with Tyson Smith. And he says, will we get Haywood? So, right off the bat, let's go ahead and talk about 5-star offensive tackle Tai Haywood, who is the most important remaining target on Michigan's board for the late period. The 2026 class is coming into focus, but there are a few guys still left on the board for 2025. And Haywood is obviously the big fish. He's been committed to Alabama since July, but opted not to sign during the early signing period a couple of weeks ago. So, I think right now the expectation around Alabama is that he will not be signing with the Crimson Tide. So the door is wide open for Michigan to complete this flip in January. I think the two biggest things with Haywood is, one, you have to get him on campus. He's never been to Michigan. Now, there is familiarity with Michigan. Sherrone Moore actually made a swing through the Dallas area where Tai Haywood's from and had a chance to see him and personally extend an offer. But Michigan was never a true player in his recruitment, but still some familiarity there with Sherrone Moore. But like I said, getting him to campus, getting him more familiar with the program, getting him to sit down with offensive line coach Grant Newsome, getting to reconnect with Sherrone Moore, meeting with general manager Sean McGee, just getting the overall feel for the environment at Michigan, I think will be important. But the most important factor in this recruitment is obviously NIL. Now, we can't escape it. It just is what it is. And I think with Tai Haywood, Michigan's, obviously revolutionized its approach to NIL. And I think Haywood is a prospect that Michigan would be willing to spend a lot on the NIL front. So, obviously they put together a multi-million-dollar deal for Bryce Underwood. I don't think, they're going to pay as much for Haywood, but I think it'll be extremely competitive. I think right now Michigan has the inside track, but I'm interested to see if there are any new contenders that come up. Will a school that has heavy NIL like Texas A&M come into the picture, or Miami or an Oregon? Texas Tech is making a run at Haywood as well. I had heard going into the late period that Texas Tech had made a pitch and that it wasn't good enough, basically. But I think the Red Raiders are still trying. They've already put out how they're going to handle revenue sharing. Obviously, they have private NIL as well coming in from donors. So I wouldn't completely dismiss Texas Tech, but I think Michigan should be able to outcompete Texas Tech. We'll see if that happens or if I'm just underestimating the Red Raiders. And like I said, we'll see if any other teams come into the fold. But as of right now, I think Michigan's in a really good spot. They did a great job of getting him to hold off on signing. And, also, like I said, I don't think right now it's in the cards for him to stick with Alabama. So he would obviously be a great addition. Michigan already landed a 5-star offensive tackle in Andrew Babalola. I think Babalola is probably your future left tackle, and Haywood can be your future right tackle or even slide inside as a guard. So, yeah, I mean, obviously a lot to like about him as a player. You can actually watch some of the game clips from my time seeing him in Dallas a few weeks ago here on our YouTube channel. They're posted earlier today, so make sure to check that out. Let's go down to Tyson Smith again. He says, what do you think about Chip Lindsay as a recruiter? So good question. I don't think a lot of people are familiar with Chip Lindsay as a recruiter. I did a whole 1,600 word breakdown on Chip Lindsay and what he brings to the recruiting trail, which you can find over on the Wolverine. But quick summary, I don't think he's going to be a drop off from Kirk Campbell. I think that Chip Lindsay has been an active recruiter over the last several years, especially over the last few years at North Carolina. He's done a great job of establishing relationships with quarterbacks early. In fact, he has offers out or had offers out at North Carolina to several 2027 quarterbacks, and those pre-existing relationships will obviously carry over to Michigan. It'll be interesting to see who he kind of focuses on in 2026, but he has several relationships already built from his time at North Carolina. So he wasn't a guy like a Matt Weiss who's just solely focused on the team and nothing on recruiting. This is a guy that definitely takes pride in recruiting as well. On top of that, he has ties to some key states. He's had recruiting success in Florida. He's had some recruiting success in Georgia, where he spent a year as a high school coach. Obviously, North Carolina is a talent-rich state as well, and being at UNC, he's gotten very familiar with the territory there. And his home state of Alabama, he was a high school coach in Alabama for a long time before making the jump to college. And I think, his roots there could help, the Wolverines get in throughout the Southeast. So, again, has some ties in some key states, an active recruiter already in it with several underclassmen, and he will primarily focus on quarterbacks, but I do think he'll be involved with some other position groups as well, and will do a lot of area recruiting around the Southeast and especially in Alabama and Georgia. Tyson Smith says, what's the best Christmas movie? I don't really love Christmas movies. Yeah, I don't know. But the one movie I liked as a child was the one movie that had the Heat Miser and the Freeze Miser. Those songs are pretty catchy. But I don't know. I don't really sit down and watch the same Christmas movies over and over. Oh, also that one with I'm getting no help from my producer, Megan, here. That one with Arnold Schwarzenegger where he has to buy the toy. I have no idea what that's called, but that one's pretty good. And then I think, Elf was good at the time. Those are probably all the Christmas movies I can name. But yes, there we go. Jingle All the Way with the turbo toy thing. I mean, that one's probably number one, and then the Heat Miser one number two, because it's like clay figures and old, and then Elf number three. That's the extent of my Christmas movie knowledge. So shout out to our producer for pulling up Jingle All the Way, which I would have just guessed was called Turbo Time or something. I had no idea that was the name of the movie. All right, Addison FM says, what's your scouting report on CJ Sadler, and what should he be ranked in your opinion? Yeah, I've likened CJ Sadler to Tavon Austin. I think he's that type of player, obviously a little smaller in stature at 5'9", 170 pounds, similar to what Tavon Austin was, but Tavon Austin was absolutely electric with the ball in his hands as a wide receiver, as a return man. And that's what you'd get in CJ Sadler. He's very, very dynamic. He's explosive. He has the speed. Even though he's a smaller guy, he's just has that kind of dog mentality. He's very tough. He can also play cornerback as well as a playmaker in the secondary. Just a really, really fun player to watch. I've been tracking CJ for a long time. Michigan offered him when he was in middle school. He grew up in the Sound Mind, Sound Body program. I mean, I remember going out to watch Will Johnson, and CJ would be there with the youth team, and he just looked way better than all the other kids and way more advanced. So yeah, I mean, CJ's been on the radar for a long time. He's not a very talkative guy, doesn't have a huge personality, not very active on social media, not a lot of self-promotion from him. But I just like the quiet confidence that CJ has and just the way he plays. I mean, he's such a fun player to watch. I especially love covering him in 7-on-7 because even though he doesn't have that boisterous personality, he's one of the best trash talkers in the game. So yeah, I love CJ, man. I think CJ is a top 100 guy. 2 services have him in the top 100. On 3 is super low on him. Number 242 nationally is again, extremely low in my opinion. I think CJ is the clear number 1 guy in the state of Michigan next year, and Michigan is treating him as a top priority. I think the Wolverines have the early lead for CJ. So that's what I would say. You would be getting a versatile, dynamic weapon that you'd line up in the slot. You can put him in the backfield. He has experience playing quarterback as well. You can line him up in the wildcat. Punt return, kick return, throw him in at corner. I mean, he's a Swiss Army knife. Noah says, I got to ask about Andrew Olesh. What happened with that? And did you have a feeling before you went up for his announcement? I didn't really have a feeling one way or the other. The way it happened was, I was going to go to the Olesh ceremony to begin with because it was on a Friday, right? So we had National Signing Day on Wednesday, and then Olesh's ceremony was on Friday. So I talked to my boss about it, Ryan Tice, who actually does a great job behind the scenes over at thewolverine.com. And I was like, hey, man, should I go out there? I think it's 50-50. I don't really know which way I'm leaning right now. And he said, yeah, I mean, it's the only thing going on Friday. So then Thursday night comes around, which I had booked a rental car for, because it's a good 6-hour drive for me, 6.5-hour drive for me. So I booked a rental car for 7 p.m. just to give myself time. And, I texted Olesh's dad. He told me that they hadn't made a decision. So I hit Ryan Tice back and I was like, hey, they haven't made a decision. They haven't informed schools. And he was like, just go get the car. So I went and I got the rental car and obviously made the 6-hour drive. And I found out that Olesh wasn't going to pick Michigan before the Michigan coaching staff found out that he wasn't going to pick Michigan. But I was already way into that drive. And I actually didn't know it was going to be Penn State. When I started getting the feeling that it wasn't going to be Michigan, I kind of felt like it was just going to be Oregon. What was interesting is I got to the parking lot of the school, and this was about 30 minutes before the ceremony. And, I get out of the car, and his mom was a big Michigan supporter. So I was like, hey, guys, good news or not good news? And Andrew laughs, and he was like, what do you mean? And I was like, for Michigan. And Andrew's mom gives me this face like she just wasn't really happy with the decision. And Andrew, when he pops out of the car, he's wearing Michigan sandals. He has the slides on that say Michigan. And I'm like, maybe he does stick with Michigan. Maybe they're fooling me. So I was confused at why he was wearing the Michigan slides. So then he does the hat ceremony or whatever. And he, threw the hats down. And at that point, I was like, maybe he's just going to put the Michigan hat on. And he grabs Penn State and puts it on. And it was super interesting because the Penn State writers didn't know at all. I had talked to our On3 Penn State reporter on the way there. And I was like, hey, man, any indication from Penn State? And he was like, well, it's probably not going to be Penn State. And the Penn State writer lives in PA, so he could have made the easy drive over to the ceremony if they would have gotten a heads up, but they didn't. The only person that knew it was going to be Penn State was actually James Franklin, and he kept extremely quiet about it. And, like I said, the Oleshes didn't really inform Oregon or Michigan. And it just happened that way. I think that, there was a lot of pressure for Andrew to stay in Pennsylvania. I think that, James Franklin, whether you want to say he sold lies or not, I think he did a really good job of convincing Andrew to go to Penn State. And it was a tough loss for Michigan. I think Michigan was optimistic throughout the fall, as evidenced by them not pursuing any other tight ends, that they would keep Olesh in the fold. Obviously, that didn't happen. So now, we enter the late period, so it'll be interesting to see if they go after a guy like Bear Tenney or Tiandre Waverly. Those are two names that didn't sign during the early period, or if they wait till 2026, in which if they only sign Eli Owens this cycle, who, I love Eli, but he's obviously more of an H-back, Max Bredesen type. They need that taller, leaner pass-catching tight end in the same mold of a Colston Loveland, which is what Olesh was supposed to be. And, I think 2026 will be extremely critical for Michigan tight ends coach Steve Casula, who has Michigan in a strong position with some high-end 26s. You talked about Brock Harris or Matt Ludwig, but just a really, really critical cycle for Casula if he only comes away with Eli Owens in 2025. But you guys saw that photo I took of the mom giving an angry glare at the photo. That was really the situation. Like, I think his mom really wanted him to end up at Michigan, and it obviously didn't happen. And, obviously his dad had ties to Penn State and tried to be neutral throughout the process, but he's become the biggest villain for Michigan recruiting, other than me, I guess. It was just a really interesting time. It was a long 6.5-hour drive there and back in the same day. So I think I spent like 14 hours on the road that day. I woke up like at 5 a.m. and didn't get back till, I want to say, close to midnight. So probably like 19 hours, I guess. For it not to be Michigan was a little disappointing since I work for the Michigan beat. But all of that to say, like, I'm a recruiting purist through and through. I built a great relationship with Andrew. And so, while it was not the outcome that I would have wanted for my site, it was still cool to see Andrew make his decision after covering him for almost the entire year, basically, and going out there so many times. But it was definitely an interesting day. Dion McQueen says, who are the defensive line targets? I'm not really, do you mean like the transfer portal, or do you mean 2026? For the transfer portal, Keyshawn Silver is definitely the guy to know. Transferring from Kentucky, he has Michigan in his top 4. He just made a visit to Michigan on Saturday, but really not sure which way I'm leaning in terms of where he's going to end up. There's a few other names are tracking, like JVR Suggs, who is transferring from LSU and has been on the radar in the past. So those are some guys to know out of the transfer portal. As far as 2026 defensive linemen, I think that right now they're still kind of resetting the board. Remember, Lou Esposito was one of the last hires, so he had to focus all of his attention on 2025. He's made a handful of 26 offers here and there, but I think that, the majority of guys are going to really be evaluated this winter, and spring evaluation period will be big for the defensive line. I'll say one guy that's at the very top of the board is Mikhail Blade from Chicago, out of Simeon. He's kind of a defensive line edge tweener. Michigan likes him more as an edge. He has an early prediction in for Notre Dame, but he actually visited Michigan in back-to-back weeks and 3 times in total this fall. So Mikhail Blade would be the one that comes to mind as, definitely going to be at the top of the 2026 defensive line board. All right, Dion McQueen says, after seeing Tai Haywood's tape, I'm impressed. It would be great if he was part of Mahler U. Okay, so just a comment there. Addison FM says, a guy who I personally see as a freak and next defensive player of the year in the Big Ten is Ricardo Kitchen. Do you have any info on him and how high on him are you? Yeah, so Ricardo Kitchen is in the class of 2027, so we're still a little while away from really, going full focus on him. But early on, he definitely looks the part of a, potential 5-star edge rusher, probably going to be the best recruit in the state in 2027 out of Muskegon. I personally have not had a chance to see Kitchen live. He kind of blew up in the rankings here in recent months. But from what I've seen on him, on tape, and I actually saw him, just in person passing by at one of the games this year, I mean, he looks the part for sure. So it'll be interesting to see how he continues to develop, but he's obviously going to be a big fish in the future for 2027. Jason Greenwood says, I know you don't do portal, but do you have a quarterback in the portal that you like right now? Yeah, I've been trying to help the team guys a little bit more with portal this year, just because the early signing period happened so soon. Like normally, tomorrow would be National Signing Day. And instead this year we had it on December 4th. So the change in timeline has allowed me to help a little bit. And since I've been on the beat for 5 years now, there are guys that they're obviously looking at with recruiting ties to Michigan that I've been able to help out with. But transfer portal is still not my favorite thing. I don't enjoy it at all. Like I said, I'm a recruiting purist. I love recruiting. That's my game. But transfer portal, I don't know. But in terms of quarterbacks that Michigan is looking at, my favorite potential target is Brendan Lewis out of Nevada, and originally by way of Texas. So I had a chance to cover Brendan when I was on the Texas beat, and he was a little bit of a sleeper who I really liked. I graded him out as a 4-star. I thought that he had some really good athleticism, had a big arm, but just needed to put it all together. And it's taken him a while. I feel like it's been a long time since I've covered Brendan at Melissa in Texas. So how long has he even been in school, man? He has to have just 1 year left. He's been in school for a long time, longer than I've even been on this beat. So anyway, but I really like Brendan as a not necessarily a project, just more as a guy with high upside. And I thought he, just looking at some of his stuff from this year, it looks like he had a really good season at Nevada. So I think he would be the one that could come in and be that, not just a bridge guy for Bryce Underwood, but could be a guy that Bryce could learn from and can also lead Michigan to victories and not just be a game manager, and maybe allow Bryce to have a little more of a JJ role, talking about what JJ was able to do as a freshman when Cade was a starter, as opposed to just kind of, letting Bryce develop in the wings and then throwing him in as the starter late in the season. I think Brennan gives you the ability to win games and just use Bryce accordingly to get him some live game reps, and not just, throw him into the fire as a true freshman. Andrew Malek says, crazy nothing Sam Webb said about you getting banned ever came to light. Yeah, I mean, obviously I wasn't banned. I had interviews with like almost all of the signees here on our YouTube page, which, by the way, great time to market. So we had signee spotlight interviews with a ton of the signees, everybody from Andrew Babalola to Jasper Parker to Andrew Marsh, to Travis Moten, who was one of the last signees. We had Shamari Earls with the 100 yards video. That was a pretty cool feature. So a lot of interviews, video interviews with the signees. You had my Q&A with Nathaniel Wusu Boateng as he, wore the Ghanaian garment. So yeah, I mean, a lot of cool stuff here on our YouTube page, sit down interviews with a lot of the signees. So if you missed out on those exclusive Q&As, do yourself a favor, go watch those, really get to know some of these guys. I've talked about it in the past, but like Eli Owens, Donovan Johnson, Caden Strayhorn, those interviews specifically are ones you should definitely watch. Just a lot of great kids in this class. It's been great covering them. And obviously, again, I'm not banned. Dutchman says, chances Michigan has a top 3 class in either 26 or 27. If they go full NIL for 26, I think that it could definitely be a top 5 class. The thing about 26 that maybe would prevent Michigan from entering into, the top 3 or competing for the number 1 spot is that you're likely not going to have a high profile quarterback, right? Because I don't think you're going to get another guy to come in after Bryce Underwood. So I think that would be the thing that probably limits Michigan from getting into maybe the top 3. But I could easily see, anywhere from, 4 to 7, which would be the highest ranked class since, I've been on the beat. And then 27, obviously a little further away, but if Michigan gets back to its winning ways, that could obviously be a special class as well. Jason Greenwood says, does Zion Elee stick with the Terps? I don't know. So for those of you that don't know, Zion Elee is the number 1 edge, number 3 overall prospect in the country, committed to Maryland. I don't know. There's still a long way. I'm sure Maryland is doing whatever they can with NIL, but I'm sure as the cycle progresses, recruitment will open up. And if, Biff comes back on staff, that kind of reopens the door for Michigan at St. Francis. Andrew Miller says, Zaire Mathis, edge. Yeah, Zaire, things have been really quiet with Zaire. He hasn't done a lot of interviews. Michigan is definitely interested. They're pushing hard for him. I do plan to go see him here in a couple of weeks. So I should have a better idea for you when we come back on whatever date that was, January 7th. I should be able to tell you a lot more about Zaire, but I think with him, a lot of it's going to be January visits, and we'll see how those go. Greg West says, is O-line development overrated? No, I mean, I think that offensive line development is very crucial. I think that's one of the positions, along with defensive line, obviously, where you can maximize the high ceilings and high athleticism. If you know what you're looking for when it comes to talent identification, then development is obviously very critical at both of those positions. I think you can find guys like Travis Moten on the defensive line, for example, who is not a very highly touted guy, but has the measurables and has the frame to really be a big time player for Michigan along the defensive line. So I would say development along the offensive and defensive lines are not overrated at all. Let's go to John A. Schulten. He says, EJ, who are the 26 quarterbacks that Michigan will be going after, especially now with Chip Lindsay as OC? Like I said, I don't think they're going to be able to land another 5-star level prospect like they did with Bryce this cycle. I think it's going to be difficult. I would expect them to, at least try, but I think that's going to be difficult. In the interim, you've noticed that Chip Lindsay hasn't offered any 26 quarterbacks since he was hired at Michigan. That's because they are still focused on the transfer portal and finding a quarterback in the portal, whether it's Brennan Lewis or DeQuan Finn or somebody else. I think that right now Chip Lindsay's full attention is on the portal window, and it has to be. It's December 17th. The portal window is only open for another, 11 days. So, I mean, finding the portal quarterback is at the very, very top of the list. And there are some guys that Lindsay offered at UNC that'll probably circle back to, like Saeed Lott was his quarterback commit out of Providence Day, where Michigan has a lot of familiarity at. But I think the 26 quarterback board won't really be set until probably the spring evaluation period when Lindsay can not only circle back to guys he recruited at UNC, but also see some new guys with that Block M on his shirt as he makes the rounds to different high schools. Let's go down to, and we've hit the 30-minute mark. So let's go ahead and do some rapid fire here. Mike TFG says, does Michigan have a legitimate shot with Zach Branch? They're going to try, but I think that one will be pretty NIL heavy. Mike TFG says, how's it looking with Savion Hyder? Nothing new to report with Savion, same top group of schools. I think Michigan still has momentum there. Georgia's very involved. You have Penn State in the mix, Ohio State in the mix as well. So, but again, I think Michigan's done a great job with Savion. He's just, really quiet. I talk about him all the time because he lives close by, but he's a quiet kid. And I will be seeing him again here in January, but nothing to really report on Savion as of right now. Let's go down to John A. Schultz. He says, EJ, of course you don't like Christmas movies. You seem extremely unsentimental. That's mean. Unless you're talking about the 21 recruiting class. Yeah, I mean, I have a pretty monotone voice, a pretty monotone outlook on life, I guess. Nightmare Before Christmas. That's number one. Got to go with a good Tim Burton film. Got to go with a good horror movie on Christmas. I think me and my wife are going to go see Nosferatu on Christmas. That's the actual release date for that movie. Robert Eager's film, which I'm excited about. Really like him as a director. So yeah, I'd rather see a horror movie on Christmas than a crappy feel-good Christmas movie. Who wants to see that? Mike TFG says, how's it looking with that OT in 26? The number one player. So that would be Jackson Cantwell out of Nixa, Missouri. He just visited over the weekend. Michigan seemed to be on the outside looking in before the visit, but Michigan's obviously willing to invest a lot of NIL into the offensive line. And when you're a number one player in the country, when you're an offensive tackle, you're going to command NIL. I'll be interested to see how much they invest if they get Tai Haywood, because you would have already landed your future tackles there with Haywood and Babalola. But I think Michigan's pedigree along the offensive line, along with Sherrone Moore being an offensive line coach and the revamped NIL, those are all things that are very appealing to Jackson. I think the visit went well this weekend. He also visited Ohio State. You have some of the more regional schools involved, I guess, in Mizzou and Nebraska. You have SECs like Alabama and Georgia. So this one pretty open early on, but I think Michigan increased their stock on the visit. Borge Warner says, EJ is the man. Love this guy. Shout out to you, Borge. Johnny Schultz says, EJ, could any of the 25 DBs be used on offense during their careers? Thinking of Dotson and Young in particular. Yeah, that is really interesting. When I was doing the scouting write-ups for just kind of ranking the commits and stuff for our magazine and also for the site, something that kind of stood out to me that I hadn't really thought about is all the DBs also started on offense. So Shamari Earls was a dynamic wide receiver as a junior and probably a power 4 caliber wide receiver. Jordan Young, a power 4 caliber wide receiver as well. In fact, when he was, making his decision, NC State pushed wide receiver a ton. So he's definitely one that could see some time on the offensive side of the ball, and he's probably going to push Michigan to give him an opportunity there. You had Kainoa Winston, who was the Wildcat quarterback and running back for Gonzaga this year. Jaden Sanders started as a wide receiver, and Elijah Dotson started as a wide receiver for Belleville as well. So all of those guys were starters on the offensive side of the ball too, the only non-receiver being Kainoa. But Kainoa is pretty good with the ball in his hands as well. So yeah, I mean, I think any of those guys have the potential and they all have the experience to play on the offensive side of the ball. I think those two guys you mentioned probably have the biggest chance in Dotson and Young, mostly because I think you obviously want to use Shamari in a similar way you used Will. And I don't think Jaden Sanders is a power 4 caliber receiver, though he's a good athlete. And with Kainoa, I think maybe throw him in on offense at some position, but maybe not receiver. Borge Warner says, what linebackers do we have on the board for 26? I was looking at the 26 linebacker board. I had the same thought as you, Borge Warner. I'm like, who are they going to get at linebacker in 26? Because they only landed Nathaniel Wusu-Boateng, who is the only guy I view as a true linebacker, since I see Chase Taylor as more of an edge. So, 26 linebacker recruiting will be really, key for Michigan. And I went and I looked at the board, and there just aren't a lot of big names early on. You have Kenneth Goodwin from the West Coast in California who visited. He's a 4-star prospect. You have Isaiah Simmons here in my backyard out of Norfolk Maury. Just won a state title, really athletic, speedy backer. But yeah, Brian G. Muir needs to pick it up in 26, man. That's all I'm going to say about that. John A. Schultz says, EJ, if you were forced to predict today, yes or no, Michigan lands a 5-star offensive tackle in 26. If they get Haywood, I'm not sure. I'd probably lean no. Borge Warner says, are there any underrated guys like Graham at defensive tackle for 26? For defensive line, I think you usually have more late risers. You have to remember Mason Graham was a guy that didn't really pop up on Power 4, at the time Power 5 recruiting radars until a little bit later in his cycle. I think defensive linemen just pop up later. And even when, we were talking about the 26 defensive line board, there aren't a lot of names because Esposito was so focused on 25, but also because I think you see more names emerge once coaches can go out on the road and see guys during the spring evaluation period. Borge Warner says, do you like hummus? No, I don't like hummus. That's a weird question, but I actually do not like it. Let's go down to John A. Schultz, and he says, EJ, is there a bigger snake oil salesman on the recruiting trail than James Franklin? Probably not. Let's go down to Jason Wilbury. Says, any chance we get, I think he meant Savion Hyder and Javian Osborne together in the 26 class. Yeah, there's a chance. I think Michigan needs to do a bit of a better job of selling them on being a combo and getting the fan base behind that, as opposed to having the fan base about arguing one or the other. But I think they would be a great combo. In Osborne, you'd have a speedy back, and with Hyder, you have a guy that's a bruiser between the tackles. Mike TFG says, why did Isaiah Gibson post a bunch of Michigan stuff on his Instagram story the morning before he committed to Georgia? Was he trolling? Yes. David Chapman says, Michigan spent a lot of money on a general manager, NIL department, scouting outside of Bryce, who we paid $10 million. Where's the results? Players are getting snatched up. Well, Bryce is a result. You also had Shamari Earls, Nathaniel Wusu-Boateng, Jordan Young flipping late. All of those, I'm not sure would happen if Michigan hadn't revamped their NIL. If you're talking about portal, obviously the results haven't been amazing yet, but there's still some time there. Mike TFG says, is there a spotlight signing with Chase Hershey? No, there's not. He's not one that we were able to do. John A. Schultz says, EJ, do you think Zachariah Branch is worth the NIL number that would be required to get him to Michigan? I really liked him as a recruit, but I don't know, because I've heard that number is going to be pretty high. Any chance we get Justin Shaban from Toledo, the number 1 nickel in the country? It's not really a name I've heard connected to Michigan, but that doesn't mean that there isn't interest. I guess I just haven't really heard that one. Dominic Marengo says, odds on landing or pulling Jordan Shipp into the portal. Yeah, he's not in the portal, but if he does enter, I think that obviously Michigan would have a really good shot there. John A. Schultz says, EJ, would Justice Haynes be a great fit for Michigan? How did you rate him as a prospect in high school? I didn't cover him too much because Michigan wasn't that involved when he was a recruit, but really strong back, great athlete who was also a star baseball player. So, yeah, I think he would be a great fit. Michigan doesn't really have a proven back. I mean, obviously there was a lot to like about Jordan Marshall. Ben Hall has shown, more flashes than expected, but none of those guys really have a lot of career yards. Not that Justice Haynes has a ton, but I think he had more yards this season than the whole running back room combined that's coming back for this coming season. Mike TFG says, how loaded is the Michigan 27 in-state class? Very loaded. I mean, you have so many names, a lot of guys in the top 100. We talked about Ricardo Kitchen. There's Dakota Gorant, who's potential 5-star receiver out of Harper Woods. You have Anthony Cartwright, who's a top 100 tight end. Holden Nemi at Dexter, who's a top 100 tight end. So yeah, a lot of in-state talent in 2027. Mike TFG says percent of Underwood starting fully or starting like JJ's career. Yeah, like I said, if Michigan's able to get maybe a Brennan Lewis type, I think Underwood will have a JJ role as a freshman, and then you'll see him start fully moving forward. Struggle streaming with BK says, EJ, do you think CJ Sadler is coming into Michigan? I do think Michigan is the leader right now. John A. Schultz says, like the video, it's Christmas time. Yeah, make sure to like the video for sure. Subscribe to our YouTube channel for free. Mike TFG says, does Pete Nakos have sources when saying Michigan is a school to look for branch? Yeah, Pete Nakos is our On3 transfer portal / NIL insider, and he deals with a lot of agents, and I'm assuming that he's talking to that side. Struggle streaming with BK says, EJ, have you seen the running back kid out of Rockford named Isaiah Wright? Kid looks like a hidden gem. I have not, but maybe I'll give him a look. CJ Mike 1024 says, when is Michigan going to get a true 5-star game-breaking edge rusher? I don't know, man. I mean, that'll be really key for Lou Esposito in 26. I think it's going to be a big year for him on the trail, especially at the edge position, since I see Nate Marshall as more of a tweener. I'm not huge on Julius Hawley. So I think finding that elite edge rusher is something that's imperative for Espo. John A. Schultz says, EJ, will Belichick succeed at UNC? I have no idea. That's a weird fit for sure. Dominic Marengo says, besides Bryce, who's your favorite in the 25 class? Shamari Earls would be, Shamari or Babalola. I think there's 3 legitimate 5-star players in this class, and those are the 3, Bryce, Babalola, and Shamari. Let's go down to Dion McQueen. He says, EJ, who would you like Michigan to make a major push for on the portal? Obviously the branches would be great. Justice Haynes would be a great addition. It'd be great if they could land Keyshawn Silver. I think I would like to see them find a wide receiver that has legitimate times. I think they need more. It's great that they're adding more size to the wide receiver room, but I think they need more speed as well. John A. Schultz says, any interest on Michigan side for Deshaun Warner out of the portal? Obviously, there's a recruiting tie there, but haven't heard really anything on Warner. I think he might have committed somewhere. Mike TFG says, if Branch commits, does his brother follow? I would assume it's more of a package deal. So just like the Metcalf brothers were. Dominic Marengo says, who do you think is our worst coordinator, coach, or least productive? From a recruiting perspective, I would say the most disappointing recruiter is Brian G. Mary. All right, so I guess I'll be getting coal from Brian G. Mary this year for Christmas. So appreciate you guys for joining the show. Like I said, make sure to like this video, subscribe to our YouTube channel for free, and also subscribe to the Wolverine.com. Use that special promo code UM1. That's $1 for 2 months. Don't miss out on all the intel coming out of the transfer portal and, all the late period action we'll be getting in January. So I will see you guys after the holidays in a couple of weeks.